Thank you, Dr. Langworthy, and I'm really happy to be here with y'all. Commend you on setting yourselves up for success as best you can. There's a lot in life that you can control, and there's a lot in life you can't control. So it's good of you to control the things you can. I'm glad there's a clock there that I can see so that I don't ramble for too long, because I know we've got a short amount of time. I want to cover a couple different things for you guys, with you guys. Kind of a little bit of my story. You heard Dr. Langworthy kind of give a little bit of a bio, and she's right. I've done a lot of different things in my probably 12 years or so in professional life. And then I want to talk about two things, primarily doing something that's worthwhile and meaningful, and then learning how to think, not learning what to think. And so those are two important things. So like Dr. Langworthy said, went to Blackman, graduated, went to MTSU, wanted to stay here in town. We were walking in, and she asked when the last time I was here, Siegel High School, and it was as senior after prom. I came to prom here, so it's been, that was 2007 when I was here last. So, yeah, there you go. There you go. That makes you feel fine. That's maybe the first time that's ever happened to me. So hey, we've shared that experience together. So grew up here in Murfreesboro, went to MTSU, wanted to stay here in town, had a lot of friends, but MTSU really was a good option for me, and it made sense from our whole lives, financially, all these sorts of things. I had to work my way through college, and so it was important for me. And I'll give a plug here. There's a legislative internship program that got me started that the state universities have. And so that was kind of my first entree into this world. Growing up, people always said, hey, Alex, you'll be a great politician one day. And now I'm not sure if that was a compliment or an insult, considering the politicians we have. But so politics had always kind of been something that had been in my mind. And so I decided to study political science, decided to do this internship, and I kind of got bit with the bug. And that will probably happen to a lot of you. You'll stumble into a situation that you wouldn't have otherwise expected, and all of a sudden you'll say, yeah, this is where I see my life going. And so that's what happened to me, and it's been good. So did that internship program for a semester, and the continued plug is you get to work full time. You don't have to go to class, but you get class credit and you get paid. So it's a paid internship. So keep that on your radar if that's something you're interested in when you get to college. But I went up there, and a lot of people wanted to have a good time, and that's important. But I thought, this is what I want to do, so I worked my tail off. And then my next job was kind of a half step up from an intern. I became a clerk in the Senate Clerk's office for the Tennessee State Senate. And for those of y'all who don't know, the State Senate up in the Capitol building has 33 members. So like the U.S. Senate, it's much smaller than the House. And it was a great opportunity for me to build relationships and work hard. And it was a role that you kind of go in and you just have to be a utility player. You fill in here, you fill in there. There's not really a set hard skill, like you've got to be able to do this thing in order to do it. You kind of just have to be able to think and be able to talk to people. And so it worked out for me. And then my next role, I had the opportunity to go work for the Senate Majority Leader in the Tennessee Senate. And he was a lawyer by trade. He was a practicing litigator, a really good attorney. He now sits on the federal, he's a federal judge now. He was appointed to the federal bench. And so I worked for him for, 6 years, I think. And that was a really informative experience for me, because one of the things that I learned from him was the importance of getting to yes. And that's kind of something that's impacted the way I approach life and the way I approach dealing with people especially in a role like mine now where I'm doing a lot of negotiating, doing a lot of compromising, not of my beliefs and those sorts of things, but of trying to figure things out to make things work for all parties was getting to yes. And so I was able to learn from him, and he was great, and kind of let me go to law school at night. So I went to the Nashville School of Law, which is a really good practical law school that's there in Nashville. It started at the downtown YMCA over 100 years ago, doing night law classes, and they've grown and now have their own facility, and it's a real place, I promise. But was able to go to law school, and law school is kind of the culmination of kind of the liberal arts education, because there's a lot of content that you learn, a lot of content. People always say, is law school hard? And it's not that the concepts are hard, it's that the volume is just so high. You have to learn so much about so many different things. But the thing about law school, and really about a liberal arts education, humanities, is you're learning how to think, not what to think. So you think about kind of the STEM programs, which are really important. We need lots of people doing those things. But if you don't want to be an engineer, you're not going to go to engineering school. If you don't want to be a physician, you're not going to go and get an organic chemistry degree. If you're not, these sorts of things where you have to learn skills and facts and numbers and all the stuff that I have no interest in learning. But law school is where you really go and you learn how to think, not what to think. And so that's a really important part of a humanities education, a liberal arts education that I think is under appreciated by a lot of people, and it's probably not understood well enough. A lot of people think, a literature degree. What are you going to do with a literature degree? Well, you're going to read a lot, and that's good, because what reading is thinking, and writing is thinking, and if you can't think well, you can't write well. And so learning how others have thought and how others have written is very important. And so take that if you don't really know what you want to do. I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to do politics. It's kind of something I was interested in. But, I didn't, other than studying political science, like, what does that mean? What degree do you get? Take that as something that you can do if you're not really sure what it is you want to do. You can go somewhere and learn how to think. So I went to law school, and after my boss was appointed to the federal bench, I had to go look for a job because I wasn't moving to Memphis, where he was from. I was not interested in that. And I ended up getting a job practicing law. And my practice, it was kind of split 3 different ways. It was corporate law generally, and you may say, okay, what does that mean? So kind of in the legal space, you have kind of 3 general areas. You've got litigation, which is people suing each other. You've got commercial, which is transactional work. Hey, I own a building and I want to sell it. It's the lawyers that do all that deal. And then you kind of got the more general corporate practice, which is, hey, my company wants to do this. What regulatory filings do we need to make? We want to restructure. What are our legal structures that we need to have? Can someone look at my contracts to make sure we're not going to have a problem later on? So I was in that corporate space, and part of my practice was lobbying the General Assembly. So I got to put my relationships and all of that to use that I had built up over the last, almost 10 years or so, and went and became a lobbyist. And really, in Tennessee, despite what you hear in the news, lobbyist isn't a bad word, right? Like, I think we all watch TV shows, and you think a lobbyist is these, like, bad people, like handing out envelopes of money for, legislators to make bad deals and do bad things to schools and children and puppies and all these sorts of things. But lobbyists are really, in my case, communicators, because my client base was interestingly diverse. Had a lot of municipal clients, so cities and their electric utilities, but I also had Volkswagen was a client. Another multinational chemical corporation called Wacker was a client. And so our job wasn't to go and sway legislators to do bad things, but was to go communicate with them the implications of what they were doing and what that meant for our clients. And so if the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation wants to pass a new rule on environmental air pollution and this sort of thing, and this is all hypothetical, I'm just making this up, that would have implications to Wacker, that is a chemical company that has a big chemical plant down in Cleveland, Tennessee. And so our job was to communicate. Again, I don't know anything about what Wacker made or how they made it. Not a chemist, not anything like that. But it was my job to communicate those implications to the government. And so that's where a skill that I didn't learn about chemistry. Same with Volkswagen. I don't know how to make a car. I pay people to change my oil because that's how the economy works. People pay me to do things, and so I take my car and I pay someone else to do it. As President Biden said, it's good for the economy. So that's how that works. I don't know how to do that, so I pay somebody else who does. So so that's the skill there. And then in my after that, one of my clients when I was lobbying was appointed to be the Commissioner of Commerce and Insurance by Governor Lee. And when he was appointed, he asked me to come along and work with him at the department. And so my role now is, I like to think of it as I'm the lobbyist for the Department of Commerce and Insurance. And so what does that mean? Well, it's all that lobbying stuff I talked about, communicating, really interpreting is one of the ways I think about it, because you all have to take a foreign language course, all right? So you all know how to translate things from English to Spanish to French. I took Latin. It was not a great, whatever. Take something more practical. But there's a difference in translating word for word and interpreting meaning. And so that's what I do a lot. I interpret meaning so that my people that work in my department can understand what the legislature's thinking, and so that the legislature can understand what we're thinking. So that's one of my big responsibilities at the Department of Commerce and Insurance. Dr. Langworthy, my new role is took over the communications division of my department. So I now oversee legislative and communications, and obviously that's communications. So that's kind of low-hanging fruit there. But one of the things that I love about my department, and this gets to what I was talking about before, is we have 7 divisions within my department. And they really have nothing to do with one another. I give off the list of them, and people say, how is the state fire marshal's office in the same building as the division of insurance? So we regulate insurance, but my boss is also the state fire marshal. So he carries a badge. He can walk into literally any building in the state and demand insurance as a state fire marshal. But we also have the Tennessee Law Enforcement Training Academy. And we have the Tennessee Emergency Communications Board, the 911 board. I have a securities division, and I have the Division of Regulatory Boards, which oversees pretty much licensed professionals that you can think of, accountants, security guards, all these other different landscape architects, random things that have nothing to do with one another. And so one of my favorite things is, like when I was lobbying, like when I was in the General Assembly, I don't have really any understanding of all of the technical stuff that they do. But I know how to think, and I know I can problem solve, and I can figure out a solution. And that's a skill that a lot of my colleagues don't really have. One of my, a girl that works for me, she also has a food truck. She owns a food truck. We were just having this conversation this morning on the phone. Some of the people that work with her, they were at an event this weekend. They make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. This is the food truck. It's actually really good. I'm not just saying that because she works for me. But they were having some issue on the truck, and she looked at her people, and they're like, what do we do? And they just like stopped and looked at her. And she's like, well, let's figure it out. And she had to walk them through how to figure out the problem. And I don't know what it was, but they figured it out. But they didn't know how to think. And so that was a conversation that she and I had this morning that she experienced over the weekend. So it's very important to learn how to think, and to be able to learn how to think. You have to expose yourself to a lot of different ideas, and you have to kind of figure out where you are on those ideas. And so, I work for Bill Lee, who's a Republican. He's elected, to represent 6.9 million Tennesseans. That's how many Tennesseans there are. You may not agree with that, and that's cool. But we can all figure out why we disagree and still be agreeable. So that's my plug for civility. It's important these days. So I think I've rambled just the right amount of time. I would love to stop and take questions. I don't know how much time we have left.
We have about 4 more minutes.
Okay, then I rambled longer than I intended to. So I would love to answer any questions you have about anything I've done or anything I've said or not said. Go for it. Yeah.
So you said the volume of work and reading, I'm sure that happened. Was that a shock to you? Or did you come up with ways to be prepared for that?
It was, shock would be a strong word, but it was unexpected to me. I think you go into any graduate program and you're going to be inundated with work. I was shocked at the volume. Shocked again is a strong word. I was not expecting the volume. And again, it's easy stuff. The elements of a tort of assault are what there's 4 elements of assault. Couldn't tell you what they are now because I don't practice in that space. But it's not just learning those; it's learning all the exceptions and all those sorts of things. So I think yeah.
After doing both corporate law and also government,
Yeah.
which would you say provides more for your specific skills?
So a lot of my experience is in government and in those relationships. And so for me, it makes the most sense because I have the deepest experience there. They're just very different. I was in when you start at a law firm, you're very low on the totem pole. You take the work that the partners send to you. So there's not a lot of ownership. In my current role, I went from the low on the food chain to pretty high on the food chain. And so there's a lot more flexibility there. So it's not quite an apples to apples, but I think for me, government makes more sense. So, yeah.
I was going to say that being in politics, do you ever feel very pressured by the public and community that, not everything is correct or, because there's both sides and stuff like that. Do you ever feel pressured or stressed?
I think one of the things that I think is really important to think about is not letting perfect be the enemy of the good, because there's always going to be detractors. There's always going to be people who want to nitpick and say, well, you could have done this, and so I think one of the things I always try and shoot for is, like I said earlier, getting to yes with as many people on board as possible. And you're always going to have people that don't like what you've done, but I've always done what I thought is right. if you have integrity, you don't have to worry at the end of the day whether you've, I've made some people angry. I've made some very powerful, important people angry because of things I've said and done. But I've always done what I thought was right. And so that's a them problem, not a me problem. That's the way I think about it. So I think we're running down the clock if my math's right. So
Anybody else?
one more from the back of the room. Come on. You got, come on. Yeah.
All right, so when you were practicing law,
Yeah.
if someone ever asked you a question that threw you off, how did you remain calm and respond to that?
Well, lawyers, we have this trick that I can tell you the right answer to any question. And this is the answer to any question. It depends. That is always the right answer. When forced with a question you're not expecting, well, it depends. And then you ask a bunch of follow-up questions, and that gives you time to, regain your ground and figure out what you want to say. So.
That's a good tip. I want some of y'all to use that.
Yeah. It doesn't work on multiple choice tests, but pretty much any other scenario it works. So.
All right,